Hi, Bill Jones from Turntastic Wood Designs. Today I'm working on a segmented vase, and I created a video that was part one of this two-part series where I created this feature ring with a nice zigzag in it. If you haven't seen that, there's a link in the description below that'll show you where that is. So we're going to use this in the vase, and I've got all the pieces that I need cut to strips for the vase, and each one of these is going to wind up being a ring, and there's going to be 13 rings in total on this nice vase with a nice wide opening. So the first step is to take these pieces one at a time and cut the wedges out of it that will make the rings. In getting the rings made, there's quite a bit of repetition, cutting each strip into a series of wedges and then forming those wedges into rings. This is where this homemade miter sled really helps out. And if I've got the angles cut right, the wedges make nice rings. Cutting more wedges. Forms another ring. Got a little out of focus here. Sorry about that. And I just keep making rings. Next, I sand the faces of the rings flat. Ideally, I'd do this with a drum sander, but I don't have a drum sander, so I have to be very careful to keep my fingers away from the disc sander. And rings that are sanded nicely will stack up nicely. Now I mount the bottom ring on a faceplate and glue a few of the rings on top of that. I mount this on the lathe and get the rings perfectly round. This helps keep it in balance. Then I carve out the inside. And glue on a couple more rings. I get those rings nice and round and carve out the inside again. And glue on a couple more rings. The vase is getting out kind of far from the headstock now, so I've added a steady rest to help hold it while I do the carving. The steady rest is a homemade device that I've got that uses skateboard wheels that will hold the piece in place while allowing it to spin. And again, I glue on a couple more rings. And again, carve out the inside. Finally, I glue on the last two rings. Now comes my favorite part. I begin to shape the outside of the vase. I've removed the steady rest to shape the bottom half of the vase. And I start rough sanding with 80 grit sandpaper. Then I wet the vase down with just plain tap water. This makes the grain swell and helps bring out any imperfections. And when it dries, I start sanding again. I sand up through several grits all the way up to 400. After laying down some paper towels to protect the lathe, I put on a couple coats of sanding sealer. Now I'm ready to cut the vase off the waste block. I start with a parting tool and finish up with a hand saw. Well, normally at that point, take the vase and put it on the lathe kind of backwards and with the headstock at this end and finish the bottom. But actually, this was too big around to fit in my chuck. So I finished off the bottom just with some hand tools. A couple of coats of poly and this guy was ready to go. I hope you enjoyed this video, learned a lot from it. I learned a lot from it. I learn every time I turn. I learn some new things. In this case, I learned that you can do things in more than one way. Normally, to put the rings together, I use a press, but my press is broken, and that's a long story. And so I just used a log with a brick on top of it, and that worked fine. There's almost always more than one way to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish in woodworking. So if you've seen this and you want to make something similar, and you find a different method that worked well for you, that's terrific. So I just showed the method that I've learned over the years that works well for me. If you have any comments, please leave it below in the video. I'd love to hear from you, hear what you have to say. If you like this video, if you don't like it, tell me too, so I know how to improve. Please subscribe, and thanks for watching.